There's also pressures in the modern world to almost not be a man.
There cannot be any promotion or any pay rise that's worth you jeopardising your physical and your mental health.
To do the chemo. I wanted to have the operations. I didn't want her to have to do it. If I could have taken all of those operations and I could have taken all of that chemo, there were many days when I didn't have enough money to eat.
Why is it that we hide our most difficult periods from the people who love us the most in the world? Welcome to Villa 58, Stuart. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start right from the beginning.
Okay.
So you were born and raised in London.
Yes.
Tell me, what did life look like growing up?
I was born in the suburbs of London. So I was born in a town called Sidcup, and it was kind of on the southeast London-Kent border. So it was very sort of semi-rural, very nice, very sort of quiet town. And it was the early 1970s. So it was still in that time when you could, as a child, you could go out on the street and you could ride your bike and play, and it was relatively safe. So yeah, I had a good childhood. My brother and I, we were very close. There's only just under 2 years between us. So we were always together, and yeah, we had a wonderful childhood, really good.
So you shared with me just before we started that your father worked 3 jobs, 7 days a week, just to make ends meet. And I have to ask, when you were growing up, did you know what he was doing, or did you really just realise the sacrifices that he made once you became a father yourself?
When I was young, I probably didn't realise, but as I got older, he told me the story. So he was born in Waterloo, which was right in the heart of central London. At the time that he was born, which was during the Second World War, it was a very run-down part of London. It was a very poor part of London, and all of the houses and the streets and the schools were being bombed, and it was just a really tough time. And the people that came from that area tended to have a poor education. They didn't really ever break out of that environment. So they went from, their parents were manual workers. They went into, you went into the docks or you went into the market, and there was just this kind of cycle where social housing, and it was just every generation kind of went along the same sort of route. And if you lived there, you didn't really know any different, because you never had an insight into the world beyond that particular area. And my father was at a school. The school was partially bombed, and the new teacher came one day, and he said, these children have got no green space, they've got no playground, they're not doing any proper sports. And he took all the boys on a train down into the country, or to my dad, it was down into the country. And he actually took them to this place called Sidcup. And my father, he was about 8 or 9, and he got off the train, and he looked around and he said, this is a different world. This is big houses, everybody's smart, wearing suits, and it's clean. And I didn't know this world existed. And he said at the time, when I grow up, this is where I'm going to live. I'm going to buy a house here. So unlike everybody else who just, went into that same sort of, I guess, life, he decided he wanted something different, and he worked 3 jobs. He was a market porter all through the night. So he pulled, it was essentially a human cart horse. He pulled barrels of fruit and veg around central London. Before that, he was in the theatres, pulling scenery for the West End shows. So he would do that all evening, then he'd work all through the night, and then in the morning he would go and do gardening jobs all the way through the day. And by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he would grab about 3 or 4 hours sleep, and he'd go again. And he did that 7 days a week. And the man was an incredible man. But I didn't know that. He'd bought, he bought this house in Sidcup with my mum, and that's where we were brought up. And it was only as time went on that I realised that he was slightly different from most of the people who lived around there. He was a working guy, But he also had a lot of drive and a lot of ambition, and he went on to start his own businesses, and he was actually very successful. So
I feel like the working class men in London of that time really worked hard, because sometimes I think about my own father and how in that time so much was going on. There was financial difficulties. He was also facing racism and Islamophobia, and there was a lot of stress alongside raising a young family. But I also remember I never saw him complain or ask for help or cry or just say that this is hard. And if anything, I just saw him being angry a lot of the time. And I wonder if the men of that time didn't have like the tools or the language to process their emotions the way we do now.
Yeah, I think it's a generational thing. I mean, they were tough guys back in those days. You know, he came from a tough background. He had a tough upbringing, and that breeds a tough sort of character. And that's how I was brought up. I mean, I was brought up in such a way that, you know, my father was never sick. He never took time off. He never really gave us much quarter when it came to if we were feeling unwell. It was like, you're okay, go to school. You know, I've never been somebody that's particularly talked about my feelings, or I've been brought up in a way that says, you're a man, get on with it, you know, plough through, you know, push through. And that's kind of how I've lived my life, to be honest. And it's only as I've got older that I've become slightly more in sort of contact with, I guess you could call it, my feelings. Before that, it was just, you know, you're the man of the house, you've got responsibilities, you've just got to go. But it's not important how you feel. You've got a job to do. You've just got to man up and move forward. And that's kind of how I lived my life, and that's probably how my father brought me up, and hasn't done me too bad.
No, it was definitely a different time. So was it your father who also introduced you to the gym life?
It wasn't my father that introduced me to gym life, but my father, I was a excruciatingly shy, painfully shy, socially awkward, really, I had quite a difficult sort of teenage years, because I didn't have any self-confidence. I didn't have any belief in myself. It was a very difficult time for me. I was quite an introvert. I was a loner. So hence why I spent so much time with my dad. And I think he tried very hard to bring me out of my shell and give me some confidence. But how I actually discovered my training and actually my purpose in life really was just by chance. I was in London and I just stumbled across a bodybuilding shop which I'd never seen before, because I just didn't have it in the 1980s, and there were no gyms or anything at that time. And I just saw these big, strong, sort of powerful guys, and I don't know, something just connected with me. And I've told this story a lot, but I bought this, I went in and I bought this VHS video of, it was called Pumping Iron. It was an Arnold Schwarzenegger documentary about his quest to become Mr. Olympia. And I bought it and I put it in my VHS player and I watched it back to back every day, day and night. I badgered my dad to buy me some basic home gym equipment, and then I trained every day, every single day from 13, and that's how I started to find myself, find my purpose, build that confidence, and kind of go out into the world, I guess, because before that I was painfully shy and very
So would you say training and strength training and building your physique contributed directly in giving you that self-confidence and that positive sense of self that you were
Absolutely.
lacking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was training literally day and night, and at 13 years old, I thought I was starting to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so it gave me confidence. I know that I was just exactly the same skinny kid that I was, 6 months before, probably not looking that different at all, but it just helped me to feel that confidence that I didn't have before. And then obviously as time went on and I learned more about nutrition and training, and I actually did start to build something, and it's just my life. I enjoy it. I've trained every day for 43 years now.
Wow. So did you do this all by yourself, or was your dad or your brother or any friends involved?
Yeah, so initially my dad drove me to this shop and he bought me the equipment and I had it in my bedroom at home. And then a few months later, so probably 6-7 months later, my dad had shops, so he had a number of shops and I used to work for him. So I'd work literally 15, 16 hours a day, all my school holidays, whenever, Saturdays, I was always with him, I was always working with him. And I think as part of trying to bring me out of my shell and give me that confidence, he used to sort of constantly sort of put me in uncomfortable positions and rib me and wind me up. And I'd be out the back, and if a young girl came in, he'd say, "Stu, come out." And he'd say, "This is my son." And I'd get all embarrassed and go red. And he was always doing stuff like that to try and bring me out of my shell in a loving way, not in a way to try and sort of embarrass me or anything, although he did. And then one day I was in the back of the shop and I could hear him out the front talking, and he called me and he was like, Stu, I need you to come out wanting to meet somebody. And I was thinking, oh no, it's going to be another girl. He's going to embarrass me. I'm going to go bright red. So I was like hanging back and he was like, Stu, come out to the front. And then I could hear him saying, yeah, my boy Stuart, he's got big muscles. He's a bodybuilder. And I was thinking, oh no, who is he talking to? So as I walked out the shop, there were these two big guys, two really big sort of bodybuilders. And my dad said, these are two good friends of mine. They're going to take you to a gym and they're going to teach you how to train properly and show you how to do this properly. And that's what they did. They were lovely guys. They were both, I was 13, 14. They were probably about 20. So they were only young guys themselves. But to me, they were older guys. And they took me to a gym in South London and trained me and showed me how to do everything. And then I was at that gym every single day, all evening. So the minute I finished school or work, I'd be there until it closed, and I'd come home and go to bed and do it all again.
So they took you under their wing.
Yeah, absolutely. They did. They were lovely, lovely guys. And
I feel they definitely were positive role models for you. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, my father was my main role model. He was a big guy. He was like 6'4", a very, very substantial guy. He had great, he had a real sort of charisma about him. When he walked into a room, he kind of owned the room. He had a real presence about him. So he was always my hero. So he was my main role model.
I agree. And for sure he sounds like an amazing person. But I also really feel so strongly about young boys having positive role models.
Absolutely.
And I don't think we have enough of them. And I think they clearly really not only took you under their wing, they probably played a role in keeping you off the streets, keeping you disciplined, keeping you on the straight and narrow, because it's so easy, especially in London, to go the other way.
Yes. I mean, I was quite a conscientious kid anyway, and I was always with my dad, and he was the sort of guy that wouldn't have let me go off the rails, and if I had even gone slightly that way, he would have pulled me back. So he was, I guess, my main role model. And whether it's your father, whether it's these two guys that I went to the gym with, I think it's important as a young guy that you have a positive role model, that you have guys that you can look to, and you can see what you can learn from them what it means to be a real man, what it means to be a gentleman, what it means to have manners and etiquette and respect, essentially. And it's interesting that you say that, because it's not published yet, but I've just finished writing my second book, and it's all about what it means to be a real man and what it means to be a gentleman in the current world, and how to do that right when there's so much negative influence. I actually started writing it before, but when the documentary The Manosphere came on, I looked at that and I thought, this is exactly why I'm writing this book, because there's strong male influence within social media that isn't the right influence. and they're kind of skewing the they're really sort of they're giving a false sense of what it is to be a man, and it's all about, a lot of it involves being disrespectful to women, and that is the absolute opposite of how I operate. I've always, if I come into a room and a lady comes into a room, I will stand, not even think about it. That's just how, and I open the doors. If I'm on a tube and I see a lady, I'll stand for her. Now, that might be considered old-fashioned, probably is in today's world, but that's how I've been brought up, and that's what I consider to be a definition of a man that's got respect. If I'm in a hotel, like we're going to go to a hotel after this, whether it's the maid cleaning the room or it's the general manager, I speak to everybody. I call everybody sir or madam. I make sure that I'm engaging with everybody. I'm acknowledging that these people exist. Whether, as I say, it doesn't matter what rank you are, how important you are, or how seemingly some people might consider you not to be important. To me, everybody's the same. I treat them with respect, and that's kind of the gist of what I've tried to put together in this book, to say, guys, this is how you should act. This is the definition of a real man. And it's almost, I wouldn't say it's a counter to the Manosphere, but it's almost like an alternative, if you like, a proper alternative.
It sounds really relevant and much needed, especially in today's day and age, because I'm also raising a 12-year-old boy, and it's something that I also feel conflicted with sometimes, because by nature he's very soft, he's very sensitive, and I love that about him. But I also want him to grow up to be a strong, grounded, independent, masculine man as well. And I think getting that balance right, because nowadays it's about either extreme, either you suppress your sensitive side or you become really toxic and masculine. So I feel finding that in a middle way is a real issue that this generation is battling with, that wasn't an issue like 20, 30 years ago.
I think you're absolutely right, because there is, there's the Manosphere, as we'll call it, the Manosphere, but that sort of toxic interpretation of manhood, of what it means to be a man. But there's also pressures in the modern world to almost not be a man. It's almost like it's almost frowned upon if you're a gentleman, if you stand up for a lady. It's almost like, so there's, for a young guy, that's 12 or 13, it probably is quite confusing. So having that role model, having somebody that can guide you and lead by example is very important.
I think this loss of identity is such an issue across the board, like especially for my culture. The young boys, they don't quite fit into that cultural Eastern model where their parents came from Pakistan. They don't fit into that world, but they don't quite fit into the Western world either. So because they're feeling so lost, somebody like Andrew Tate comes along and gives them a clear blueprint. This is how a man should be. And he's just so loud, and he's just so, he has this way about him that just draws boys in. And that's exactly where they shouldn't be going. So I worry. I worry about the boys.
And, I sometimes have young guys that come and train with me, and I will be, I'll kind of rib them and wind them up, and I'll have a bit of fun with them. And you do need to draw sort of young guys out of their shell. You do need to sort of toughen them up a little bit, but you also need them to know what's right, what's wrong, how to treat people. So my niche, or the guys that I tend to work with, are guys in their 40s or 50s, just because that's the background that I come from, the corporate world. But I actually do quite enjoy working with the younger guys as well. Yeah,
no, it's much needed for sure. So I'm excited about that book coming out. Okay. And you also wrote this book as well, Fat Cat to Butcher's Dog. I love the title, by the way. Okay. It's really catchy. Why did you write this book? I
wrote that book because I spent over 30 years in the corporate world, at C-suite, senior exec level, and it's a hard environment. You have very long hours, lots of pressure, lots of travel, you have the pressure of leading large global divisions, or so it's a brutal, tough world to operate in. And a lot of the guys that I worked with, dealt with, were absolutely at the top of their game. They were top performing CEOs, COOs, and they put so much into the career, into the results, that nearly all of them had actually neglected themselves over time. They were putting on weight, their health was suffering, they were becoming pre-diabetic, and they had all sorts of health issues, not because they needed to, just because they just were so busy and so focused. And honestly, they believed that they just didn't have the time, or they were too old, or they all had a different reason for why they didn't have the time or the ability to get themselves in shape. So I've lived in that world. I know all of those pressures, but I've also managed to maintain the habits and the lifestyle that I have, which involves training every day, eating correctly, eating the right foods. And I just thought, hey, I could help a lot of these guys. I could share my knowledge. I can have a conversation with these guys, and I know all their pressures. So it's not like a 25-year-old gym guy saying to them, you need to get up at 5 a.m. and you need to do this and you need to train and you need to eat this, because it just wouldn't work, because it just doesn't fit into these guys' lifestyles. So I can actually sit down with them and say, I understand that you're traveling 3 times a week. I traveled 3 times a week all over the world for years. I've got habits and techniques for optimizing the airport, for having your PA find the perfect hotel, how to navigate the business dinners. I've worked all of that out. I've got the systems, I've got the techniques. So let me help you, and let me help you with your nutrition. Let me help you with your training. You don't need to be in the gym at 5 a.m. 7 days a week. We can do that 3 times a week. And I build something that works around their lives, their schedule. And I was doing that with certain individuals. And then I thought, well, actually, I could just write the book. I could talk about all of those pressures. I could dedicate chapters to whether that's training or nutrition or recovery, which is really important, or energy optimization, time management. I talk a lot about how you optimize your time. Actually, one of the first things I do with my clients before I talk about nutrition and training is I say, show me your week, show me your diary. Because most guys say, I'm too busy, I haven't got the time. And we sit down and we go through the diary, and I'll go through meeting by meeting, and I'll say to them, why are you in that meeting? And they'll say, oh, because it's my weekly meeting with my direct reports. Is that meeting driving the business forward? Is that meeting leading to decisions that you're making that can't be made without you in the room? And if the answer is no, you don't need to be in that meeting. That can be a report that they write and they email to you on a Friday, and if you've got any questions, you have a conversation with them. So there's 1 hour. And we go through each of the meetings, and it's the same criteria. Are you in that meeting because you need to be in that meeting? Are you in that meeting because it's driving the business forward? Are you in that meeting because you need to be the one who makes the decisions? If you're not, probably don't need to be in the meeting. We also talk about the power of no. A lot of senior guys will take meetings with anybody because they feel that they need to, and they have to have those conversations. And we'll sit down and say, is that actually helpful to you and to the individual? Because if the individual could be getting more time with your direct report, then it's probably there's probably more advantageous for them to have that meeting, and that frees up more of your time. So we just, we go through that, and I find them the time. And once they have the time, I then say, right, now we're going to focus that time on you. And we talk through techniques, we talk through the plans that we're going to have. We then talk through nutrition, and I put training plans together for them. And now that I'm in Dubai and I've got the time, I'm able to actually do the one-to-ones as well. So I actually spend one-to-one time with my clients. I've got a private studio now, so we go into the studio and we work out together.
So when I was reading this book, I know that you've got a large part dedicated to dismantling all the excuses that people use to say why they can't do something.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, firstly, you are without doubt the most disciplined man I have ever met.
Okay.
To have not missed a day of training in over 40 years. And also, I couldn't help but connect this to my religion as well, Islam. Arguably, it's like the most disciplined frameworks on earth, where we're supposed to pray 5 times a day at their prescribed times. And it doesn't matter if you're tired, if you're sick, if you're traveling, or if there's a bereavement in the family, or if you don't feel like it, we can't miss our prayer. And I can't help but think that when people say they can't do something, they can't show up to, whether that's training or whether that's to prayer, can they really not show up? Or is it that deep down they just don't want to?
I think, how shall I put this? A lot of guys lie to themselves. So they're convincing themselves that they're too busy, and they're convincing themselves that they will do it, or I will start soon, and really they've got no intention to, or they just don't know how to. So a lot of the guys, they're either lying to themselves, or they're in denial, or they're just not prepared to put in the time and the effort to get the results that they need to get. And at times I am quite brutal in that book. I am, I'm quite direct. But I think if you read the book and you start to identify with some of the points that I'm making, hopefully it's going to sort of wake some of those guys up and say, do you know what? That is true. I am convinced, I'm kidding myself, and I need to take some action. So that was kind of the rationale between being so direct, because I am quite direct in the book. I make no apologies for that. But the other thing that normally triggers guys to take action is a significant event. So quite often I'll get guys come to me and it's their 40th or their 50th birthday, and all of a sudden they've been convincing themselves that they'll do it another time, or they're not really that unhealthy, or they haven't really put on the weight, and all of a sudden they're 50 and they think, yeah, I need to take some action. Or they've been to the doctors and the doctors tell them they're clinically obese, and all of a sudden they think, I've only put a few pounds on, clinically obese, and all of a sudden there's something that says, I need to sort this out. Or, I've had guys that their brothers died, or they're somebody that was the same age as them from school, a school friend has passed away, and it's a wake-up call. So there's normally a trigger for the guys to come to me and say, look, I've been avoiding this, I've been denying this, but I've got to take some action. I don't know how to do it, and I need some help. And that's normally the point in which the guys come and have that conversation with me. And if they have got to that point, they're ready to work with me. If they're still in that phase that I talk about in the book, it's probably not the right time. So I wouldn't push them at that point. I'd say to them, look, go away and think about this. I'll give them some advice. And if they come to that point where they decide they are ready and they do want to take some action, then they'll come back to me anyway. So
I agree with you. And I think it's with anything in life, you do have to challenge yourself and the excuses that you might make. And sometimes it does look like I'll do it later, or I am too busy, or whereas the truth is often the true answer is it's just not a priority in my life right now. And maybe one day something might happen that will make it a priority. Yeah. But why let it get to that stage? Because this is another thing you talk about in your book, which is the executive health crisis. Tell me more about that.
So I think guys, as you say, that operate at the top, they are very much operating at that level and at the detriment to themselves and their health. And I think what they're not realising is if they actually just took a little bit of time for themselves, what they would end up with is a much more optimised life. They would have more energy. Now, you think, oh, if I spend 3 hours in the gym, it's going to make me even more tired. Well, it won't. It's going to give you more energy. If you eat the right food, you're going to be sharper throughout the day. And it's just sort of, it's almost reprogramming and re-educating. But yeah, there's so many guys at the top that are at the top, but they're not. No, they're no longer performing at the level that they are capable of, or they used to perform at. And you start to see that decline, and you start to see the guys at the top that were once the guy that walked into the room and everyone said that's so and so, and that they're almost a shadow of their former selves. And
so I had that experience with my husband where he was at a point where arguably I would say he was at the pinnacle, top of his career, but from a health point of view, it's the worst it ever was. And I went through a period where I was lying next to him and he was struggling to breathe, he was struggling to sleep, he was struggling to regulate his heartbeat. And I remember thinking that there cannot be any promotion or any pay rise that's worth you jeopardizing your physical and your mental health. It's like a no-brainer. But I feel that when it comes to choosing one or the other, sometimes we make the wrong choice.
And obviously I've met your husband, and he's a very impressive guy, and I know he's at the absolute top of his game in the corporate legal world. And he looks very fit, so I'm sure he must have sorted it out since then.
He ended up choosing his physical health and his mental health.
Okay.
And I just feel they can't coincide at that high level together at the same time.
I'm not disagreeing, but I think it can, if you know where to focus and what to do, and you know how to optimise your time, you know how to deal with the pressure, and you do find time for yourself in terms of the training, the nutrition, eating right, focusing on sleep, recovery. It can have an incredible effect on your performance and how you feel. But yeah, I mean, operating at that level, it's hard, it's tough, especially over lots of years. There is a lot of pressure, and a lot of guys do suffer probably mental health as well as physical health. So there's, I'm not immune. I've had periods where I've had so much going on in my life that I've felt the extreme pressure. Louise is here off camera. When Louise was diagnosed with cancer, that was a very, very difficult time, because I was having to watch her go through so much pain and so much, and she was so brave and incredible. But I've still got the pressures of work, and I felt absolutely helpless, and I just felt useless really, because I couldn't take away that pain, or I couldn't do anything really. So I understand what it is to feel that pressure, and to sometimes not quite know what to do for the right thing to do. And it's not easy. It's not easy being a guy. It's not easy being a senior exec. And the guys that don't quite get it right, it's not because they're quite often it's not because they're lazy or because they're unfocused. It's just because they've got too much going on and they don't know where to prioritise their time. And that's where I come in and have a conversation with them and hopefully try and help them.
So you mentioned the time when Louise had her journey with cancer. And I remember, I think it was in the book you mentioned that even then you didn't miss working out, you didn't miss some kind of training.
No.
And when I read that, it reminded me of another book I read called The Man's Search for Meaning. And it was basically about when your life is in chaos and there's nothing in your control and you feel helpless and you feel lost, the best thing you can do is hold on to that one thing that you are in control of, that you can manage. And I wonder, for you, not missing training during that time, how much of it was you anchoring yourself into the one thing that you did have some control over?
I think it's become so much part of me that it is part of my day. And I think it is a time when I am able to process what is going on in my life. I think going to the gym is as good for your mental health as it is for your physical health. And I quite often use that time to actually process what is going on. And that was a difficult time, because we talked about what it means to be a guy, what it means to be a man. And for me, all I wanted to do when Louise was diagnosed was I wanted to do the chemo. You know, I wanted to have the operations. I didn't want her to have to do it. If I could have taken all of those operations and I could have taken all of that chemo,
I get that.
I would have done.
Completely.
And that's made me feel really helpless and useless, if I'm honest. So all I could really do was continue to be me, be as supportive as I could, be there for her, be strong. And yeah, on days that I couldn't get to the gym, I mean, this is not me exaggerating, Louise would be having an operation, her room would be empty because the bed had be gone, and I'd be in the room doing press-ups and, you know, doing whatever I needed to do because I didn't know what else to do, to be honest.
It shows how much is connected, your mental health to your physical health.
Absolutely.
That's probably what gave you the strength to keep on going through that really difficult time. But obviously the story has a happy ending. Louise, she's
here.
She's here and she looks so beautiful. And I have to say, what did you learn about her during this time?
I learned, well, I already knew that she was an incredible person, but I've never met anybody so incredibly brave. You know, she faced that challenge head on. She never complained. She just got on with it, and it was so impressive. I mean, you talk about strength and character and everything. I was just in awe of her. And let's be honest. She had breast cancer. She's BRCA1 and triple negative, so she's got all of the genes that it's not a good thing to have. And Louise is somebody that, you know, her appearance, her looks are very important, as it is for all ladies and guys. And the cancer ripped all of that away, you know, took all of her hair, which was terribly hard the day that we had to shave her head. So I told you I get emotional now. I never used to when I was young. And, you know, I hope she won't mind me saying, but she had to have like double mastectomy and hysterectomy and all the things that make you a woman, make you feel like, you know, yourself. That was all taken away. It was it was horrible. But she came through it. You know, she's here today. She looks absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
And, and that's because she's such a strong person. And again, I'm not sure if it's in the book. I don't think it is. But what made it even harder was I lost my father at 29. Louise lost her mother at 29. We lost both of them in the same year when we were just a young couple. Our daughter was just a few months old, and we went from having this perfect life, absolutely perfect life, to these two tragic events. And her mum was diagnosed with cancer and died at the same age that Louise was diagnosed with cancer, with the same BRCA gene. So you can imagine for Louise having to go through that and think, well, my mum died, you know. So I can imagine that the weight of that as well must have been incredible. But she battled through, she beat it. And that's part of the reason why we're here in Dubai now, because we realised that life is short. We realised that you're not guaranteed to be here forever. You're not guaranteed to be in good health. You know, we were two individuals that were very healthy. We had a home gym. We both trained. We both ate healthily, and all of a sudden, we got called into a room, and Louise got told she had cancer, and we had this incredible journey, this battle, and I mean, I never doubted for 1 minute that she'd come out of this, but if you don't, life is short. And after that, we both looked at each other and said, we've got to make the most of this life. We don't know how long we've got. Well, that's me, Louise, anybody. And that's when we said, right, we're gonna ditch the corporate world. We're gonna go on an adventure. We're gonna live our lives for ourselves. we've got an incredible daughter. She's 26 years old now. She's a barrister in London, very successful barrister. I'm super proud of her. And during the time when Louise was ill, my mother was also ill. She had a stroke, and my brother and I were caring for her. To be honest, my brother took the lion's share. He's an incredible guy. And she passed. So my mum had passed. My daughter had found this incredible career. She's getting married next year, so she was settled. And Louise had come out at the end of this battle with cancer, and we were like, this is our time. If we don't grab this moment now, who knows? So we literally sold up everything, the house, everything, and we came to Dubai with a couple of suitcases, and we've started again. And it's been the best thing we ever did. We've been here 4 months. We're building 2 businesses, and it's fantastic. I wouldn't change a thing for the world.
I love that. And I often say that nobody's pain should be in vain. And I can't help but think that had Louise not gone through her journey, maybe you wouldn't have come out on the other side and think, I can do more with my life. We can want more, we can pursue more, and maybe we can do things a bit differently to what life was like prior to the diagnosis. Do you think that played a key role?
I think you're probably right, actually, yeah, because before that, I think I just assumed that life was eternal. I'm fortunate, I'm 55, and I'm fortunate enough to be very fit and healthy. I've never really felt any kind of aging. So I don't feel 55. I still feel like a young guy. I've still got all the energy and the vitality. And I just kind of thought, I'm going to live forever. And, and then all of a sudden something like this happens, and you realise just how fragile, just how uncertain life is, and it's not guaranteed. You're not guaranteed to be here tomorrow or next week or the week after. So the time that you do have, you've got to optimise every minute of it. And I was at a point in my life where we had a lovely house, we had, a beautiful daughter, we were comfortable, we didn't really want for anything. But was I truly happy? Not really. I was in a corporate role that, it paid good money, but I wasn't fulfilled and I wasn't particularly happy. And we were coming to Dubai on holidays and things, and we just sat down one day, we looked at each other and we said, we're going to go. We're going to go and we're going to live a different life. And we made that decision, and it's the best decision we made. And there's nothing that would make me change that decision. It's been great.
And I think it puts things into perspective as well. Like sometimes we get so bogged down with things like, I don't know, the grades or the traffic or current affairs, or just things that aren't really that important, but we get so fixated, and then something like this happens, a life and death situation, and then you're like, nothing else matters other than you're healthy and I'm healthy, and that should be like the priority. And I even say this to my husband often as well, that nothing in this world should be dearer to you than your physical health and your mental health. Absolutely. Because without it, you can't experience any joy in life.
And that's, I kind of touch on that in the book, because you can have, I worked with guys and, they had the Ferrari, they had the Rolex, they had the custom-made suit. But underneath that, they were overweight, pre-diabetic, lacking energy, unable to play with the kids or the grandkids because they were just not in the right physical shape. They weren't operating at an optimal level. They were, they had brain fog, and you could just see their energy. And I used to look at them and think, you can tell me every single statistic about this business. If I asked you about your car, you'll tell me about its performance and what torque it's got. But if I asked you what your blood pressure is or what your BMI is, they just wouldn't be able to tell you. And I used to look at them and think, your body is your vehicle for long life and for happiness, and you want to be there for your grandkids. And if you're not looking after yourself, you're effectively, you're giving up on life in a roundabout way. So again, that was another motivation for writing the book.
So you shared that whilst you were in the UK, you had a great house and business and job and everything, but you shared with me earlier that there was a time where you lost the house and the business and you went through a really difficult period as well. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. As I say, you know, I've always worked very hard. I've always been a very ambitious guy. I've always been one of those people that no matter what role I'm in, even if I was in quite senior roles for my age, in my 20s, I was never satisfied. I always wanted to get to that next level and the next level. And as a result of that, I was reasonably successful. You know, I had the car, I had the Porsche outside in my 20s, and we had a great life. But I always wanted a bit more, and I always wanted a bit more security. And yeah, we started a business, and I put my heart and soul into it, and I worked every hour that was available. And sometimes things just don't work. You know, it's either the wrong place or the wrong time, or it's too soon, or it's just. And the reality is that we didn't get it right, or I didn't get it right, and the business failed. And you know, you live and learn. And one of the things we did was we took a lot of finance out on a lot of equipment, expensive equipment. There were personal liabilities, and you know, I look back now and I think, yeah, that was inexperience. That was just lack of knowledge at the time and lack of good advice. And as a result, when the business failed, it threw us into a lot of debt. And I'd never been in that position. I'd always had amazing credit scores. I'd always had savings. I'd always been in a very healthy position. And all of a sudden, I was in this world where I was in crippling debt, and it was difficult. And you know, I felt a huge sense of responsibility for Louise, and Kira was very little. And I got a corporate job that paid very well. So I had a pretty decent amount of money coming in, but I had so much money going out. I had so much debt and liability that even with a good salary and a great job, by week 3 of the month, everything had gone. And I'd never lived like that before, where you literally have no money for food, and it was a really tough time. And I was still operating in that corporate world, in that senior world. So I was going into the office every day, and I had huge amount. I'm a proud guy. So my family, even my family and everybody around me, I tried to hide it, if I'm being honest. I didn't want to admit that I'd had this failure. People knew that the business hadn't worked out, but I didn't want them to know just how much trouble I was in, you know, financially and everything. So I tried to hide that a lot, and I just tried to push through. And I went from having amazing tailor-made bespoke suits and shirts and handmade shoes, and over time the shoes wore through, and I had holes in the shoes, and I was putting cardboard in the shoes, and I was walking for 3 miles to the train station to go and do a 12-hour day to try and, you know, pay everything off. And it would rain and my shoes would get wet, and my suits, my lovely bespoke suits, were wearing out, and I was trying to patch them up, and all the while trying to hide it from the world that I was in a bit of a difficult situation. And it is difficult because you're in that corporate world, and somebody says, let's go and grab a coffee, and you haven't got a penny in your pocket, and you're not admitting that, and then you have to try and make excuses, or someone says, oh, let's grab some lunch, and all of a sudden you're like, I've got, you have to find an excuse. And I didn't tell Louise this at the time, but there were many days when I didn't have enough money to eat. As long as they had some food, then that was all that was important to me. And I had days many days at a time, where after a meeting, I worked in Canary Wharf, I'd go into the meeting rooms, and if there was a little bit of food left over or some biscuits, I would be, and yeah, it was a tough time, and but I worked non-stop. I rebuilt. We built back. We built bigger. We built better. We got the house back. We got the cars back. I mean, not that they're important, but I managed to keep my daughter in. My daughter was in private education, and I managed to. That's the one thing that I managed to pay. I always managed to pay the mortgage, and I always managed to pay her school fees, and they were the two things that mattered to me more, because I was determined to give her. I was determined to do for her what my dad did for me. He pushed me one or two rungs up the ladder, for want of a better analogy, and I was determined to push her up that ladder, if you like. And I was determined to keep her in school, to keep the focus on her education, on her development. And so I just worked through. Everything got paid off. Everything got resolved. It was hard. It was a good couple of years of tough times, and then we rebuilt, and we just we worked hard, and but it was tough. And interesting, we were talking about Angela earlier, and when I went to one of her talks, she talks about a very, very similar experience, and that's kind of how I initially connected with her, because everything that she was saying about her journey really resonated with me, because it is quite a unique experience. But you learn, you grow, and you become a better person for that experience. And unless you've had that experience, you can't really appreciate life itself. So I go into supermarket now, and I still to this day look at prices, whereas before I never looked at whether one brand or was more. And it's not that I don't need to anymore. It's just that I don't know. I
agree. It definitely changes your perspective if you've seen both sides. So then when you are doing well, you can really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Rather than taking it for granted.
Yeah.
So you said something about how when you were going through that period, you really hid it from a lot of the people that you know. And it makes me think, because I've been through those periods where something's really difficult happening in my life, and I'm not sharing it with my parents, and I'm not sharing it with my children. And I don't know if this is some kind of a default or something that goes on, but why is it that we hide our most difficult periods from the people who love us the most in the world?
For me, my mum was still around at the time, so my mum was aware of what I was going through and how tough it was, and I did share some of that with my mum, but everybody else I hid it from, because I think it's just a pride thing. I just didn't want people to know. I didn't want people to know. I'm sure other people would have handled it differently and probably would have handled it better. But for me, I don't know, I was just too proud to admit that I'd failed. And that is how I felt. I felt that I'd failed. I'd failed myself, I'd failed my family. But really, if you actually sort of step out of yourself and look back, and I'm actually quite proud of how I handled that. I didn't give up. I didn't fall about and break down and cry and say, why me? I just literally got up every morning at 5 a.m, rain or shine, and I just got on with it. And I thought, I'm going to get through this.
That's what I wanted to ask, because you rebuilt bigger and better than before. So what lessons did you take, or what did you consciously do differently the second time round?
Well, I'm far more I say I'm far more cautious now. I don't know, Louise is shaking her head. I've always been somebody that I'm prepared to roll the dice. If I think there's an opportunity, if I think I can make something of something, my default is I'll make that work. I'm going to go for it. But I think now I caveat that with, does it make good business sense? What is the small print? Because I got caught out on the small print. That was really what caused me the issues on that particular part of my life. So I think it teaches you to be, that you don't necessarily have to curtail your entrepreneurial ambitions or the way you are, but you need to have a balanced and sensible approach to not just throw caution to the wind. And that's where the partnership with Louise and I is so powerful, because I am the guy that will just say, let's do it. And she's the sensible one. So she's my kind of, she's my
Yin
conscious.
to your yang.
Yeah. I think I described it once in one of, I don't know if it's in the book or one of my articles that I write. I said that, you know, I'm the accelerator and she's kind of the steering wheel and the sort of the brakes. So between us, if I say to Louise yes or no and she says no, I've learned that I listen to Louise now.
I love that. I'm the same. I'm the voice of reason to my husband as well. And you
Yeah.
need a bit of both. You can't be
Yeah.
overly cautious and you can't be like over the top and everything's possible. So it's nice when you have that together. So I wanted to ask you about your daughter, who's now a UK leading barrister. You must be so proud.
Oh, absolutely. I'm super proud of her. She's an amazing young lady. And she's intelligent, she's compassionate. She's everything to me, really.
What do you think she's learned from you, watching you parent and watching you go through the things that you did, or what do you hope that she has learned from you?
I hope that she's taken my good traits, because I you know, I'm not perfect. You know, I've got plenty. I mean, I'm not even going to look at Louise when I say this, but I've got plenty of faults and failures and weaknesses, and so I'm not perfect by any sense. I'm far from it. So I hope that she's taken my good traits, my work ethic, my respect for others, my just generally the way that I live my life. So hopefully I've been a good role model to her. But Kira is, hopefully she's got the best of me and she's got the best of Louise. She's got a lot of Louise's good traits as well. So I think as a team, as parents, we've tried to be balanced. So I was always the father that kind of said no. Oh no, that's too dangerous. We can't do that kind of. And Louise was the one who would sort of. So look, Kira would always go to Louise, to Mum, and then Louise would have to sort of convince me. And we had quite a unique, maybe it's not unique way of sort of parenting, but I've always pushed her to succeed, but I've always tried to be sort of caring and loving, and you know, I've tried to sort of balance you need to do this with, you know, sort of the softer side as well.
I'm sure she's learned so much, because essentially they learn just by watching us. It can never really be what we sit down and teach them and lecture them. And I'm sure just by watching you and how you've handled things, I'm sure she's learned so much.
I think she's probably learned from my mistakes as well. I mean, and I'm sure she's an very intelligent girl. I'm sure she can see the areas that I haven't been successful in, and hopefully she learns from that as much as anything else. So, but yeah, she's great, and she's actually coming over next week to Dubai. I haven't seen her since I left the UK, so I have missed her a lot. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing her next week.
Great. So Stuart, I want to close by asking you that obviously since your father has passed away, so much has happened, the loss, the rebuild, Louise's journey, you writing 2 books. If he was here today, what do you wish that you could tell him?
I would, firstly, I'd give everything in the world to have that conversation. I'd hope he's proud of me.
I'm sure he's so proud of you, Stuart.
I would tell him that I've lived every day the way that he lived his life, and I hope I've been even a shadow of the man that he was. He was an incredible guy, and I have lived my life not trying to be him, but just trying to emulate everything that he was. And when he died as the eldest son, I almost felt responsibility to sort of step into his shoes and become that guy that was strong, that led the family. But I'm never going to be him. I'm never going to be able to fill his shoes. But I've lived every day of my life trying my best.
Well, it sounds like you are carrying on his legacy. The way your father gave you more than he had, and then going on how you've given more to your daughter, and as a result, you are just going higher up. Your legacy is going higher up the ladder, and I love that.
I hope so, and that's exactly, I think you've hit the nail on the head, that's exactly the approach that I've taken. He sacrificed so much. He had the vision, he had the drive in him to pull himself out of the slums, to give my brother and I a better life. And I've gone through the hardships, and I've done everything possible to give Kira, to elevate Kira and elevate her to the next level. And I guess if he was here now, he'd probably see that, and I'd like to think he'd be very proud.
I'm sure he would be. So Stuart, you clearly embody all the work that you do, you write about it and you live it. If there's anyone listening out there who would like to work with you, who would like to move and push themselves to the next level, how can they get in touch with you?
They can message me via social media on LinkedIn or Instagram, or just reach out. I love meeting people. I love having a good conversation. I say it a lot here in Dubai. If you're in Dubai and you just want to have a conversation, we'll meet for a coffee, just meet me we'll have a great coffee. What's the worst that can happen? We'll have a great conversation, a great coffee. Hopefully I'll give you some tips and advice. And if you're ready, let's work together. If you're not, go away, have a think about it. When you are ready, give me a call. And I just love helping people and working with people.
Thank you so much for coming, Stuart.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.